A union president warns that Canada's understaffed border security agency is prioritizing facilitation over public safety, jeopardizing national security by relying on phone apps instead of in-depth human interviews.
A former Trudeau-era Liberal minister has been awarded a new position as Canada's ambassador to the UN, despite leaving behind a scandalous legacy from his time in government.
Conservative criticism is escalating against Liberal Immigration Minister Lena Diab after a Conservative MP alleged rejected asylum seekers receive better health benefits than many Canadian citizens. Hello Canada, it's Friday, November 21st, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Cosmin, Dzsurdzsa.
And I'm Clayton, DeMaine.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Canada's border security is at risk, according to a union president who warns that the federal agency is dangerously understaffed, relying too heavily on phone apps over human interviews and prioritizing, quote, facilitation over keeping the country safe. Mark Weber, national president of the Customs and Immigration Union, testified during a House of Commons Immigration Committee meeting studying the Liberals' Bill C-12, also known as the Strong Borders Act. Weber stated that the measures in the new bill would be ineffective unless the Canada Border Services Agency's budget and staffing issues were resolved. Weber said certain aspects of the bill were positive, including addressing the CBSA's current lack of access to import and export facilities. He noted that the agency currently cannot conduct inspections on certain modes of export and import, such as rail, due to a, quote, now well-established lack of staff and facilities. Weber acknowledged that Bill C-12 aims to speed up the refugee claim process and reduce what the government calls, quote, lengthy processing times and backlogs. However, he argued that the issue would be far less considerable if the agency's sustained understaffing were addressed. During his testimony, Weber highlighted that the CBSA lacks the staff to conduct what he outlined as critical in-person interviews with individuals attempting to cross into Canada. He added that the agency now relies on a phone app called One Touch to process refugee claims. Weber said, quote, One Touch means claimants spend significantly less time meaningfully interacting with officers, with the result of reduced security for the sake of expediency. Interactions between officers and anyone who seeks to enter the country, be they travelers or refugee claimants, are a key component of border security. While being questioned by Conservative MP Brad Redekop, Weber called the One Touch app a, quote, terrible thing. He said it replaced critical security screening done by human agents, and that the CBSA was now prioritizing serving migrants and refugees while putting border security on the back burner.
In essence, to speed things up, because we are short-staffed, we're allowing people into the country without first doing that security screening.
Okay, hold on a second here. So you're saying that a refugee claimant coming to Canada goes to a machine and says, I want to be a refugee in Canada, hits a button, and they're in the country? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not a machine, it's an application. So the One Touch system, they're given instructions on how to use that. That connects directly with IRCC, and they're given that documentation to complete on their own once they're in the country. We're not doing that. So basically
they take out their phone theoretically and they tap it a few times and they are now in the country as a refugee accepted by our country.
Yes, we get some basic data from them, and again, we do the biometrics. But beyond that, they're doing that on their own, yes.
Clayton, from following this bill, I know it was introduced a few months ago, but it has undergone some significant changes. What do we know about the Strong Borders Act, and how will it determine how the government handles border issues if it's passed?
Yeah, so the Liberal government originally introduced the bill first as Bill C-2 in September, and it immediately faced backlash from civil liberties groups who warned that the bill would violate Canadians' privacy rights. The bill is aimed at strengthening powers to help secure Canada's border, but it allowed Canada Post and police to open, seize, and retain mail. It would expand CSIS powers and enable warrantless access to personal information. It would require electronic service providers to secretly give data to authorities while gagging them for a year from disclosing what they compiled. Critics said the bill's scope was excessive and it added civil liberties violations to a bill that would otherwise just be on border measures. So the Liberals ended up splitting this bill. Now, Bill C-12 keeps many of the C-2's border security reforms, but removes the most controversial surveillance powers, including warrantless access to subscriber data, opening mail, and a $10,000 cash transaction cap. The new bill still contains major immigration and border provisions and would expand CBSA's power, data sharing measures, and limits on refugee hearings for people in Canada for over a year. So this CBSA union boss we just heard from said he actually welcomes a lot of the new powers in the bill, but that much of it would be nearly meaningless if the CBSA still lacks the funding, staff, and political will to get anything done. And conservatives are pointing out that there are many flaws with the bill, as it doesn't disincentivize fraud in like the asylum claims, for example, or make it easier to deport people or effectively deal with convicted criminals already in our borders using or abusing the immigration system. Despite a record of controversy, former Trudeau-era Justice Minister David Metlege is back in the public service after Prime Minister Mark Carney appointed him as Canada's new ambassador to the United Nations in September. Metlege officially took up the post on Tuesday. The former Montreal MP will represent Canada at the UN, replacing Bob Rae, who held the position for 5 years. Metlege served as Minister of Justice and Attorney General from 2019 to 2023, stepping into the role after the dismissal of Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was removed from cabinet after resisting political pressure in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, an episode that triggered one of the most damaging ethics scandals of the Trudeau era and led to high-profile firings within the Liberal government. As Attorney General, Metlege defended the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act to end the 2022 Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa, the first time the legislation had ever been invoked. The decision was later ruled unlawful by a federal court judge, raising renewed concerns about civil liberties and government overreach. His time as Justice Minister also drew scrutiny over the ideological tilt of federal judicial appointments. Among Metlege's appointees was Ontario Superior Court Justice Renu Mandhane, who recently disqualified a loaded illegal firearm as evidence in a case against a black driver, ruling that Peel police had engaged in racial profiling. A separate case involving federal court justice Avi Yao Yao Go has also sparked criticism after she granted a stay of deportation for an Indian non-citizen with multiple criminal convictions, citing his wife's ADHD as a determining factor. So, Cosmin, what sort of message does this send to current Liberal MPs that an MP plagued by a scandal could still be rewarded so long as they remain loyal to the party?
Yeah, I think it's also important to ask, what message does it send to Canadians? And I think what we're seeing is that as long as you stay loyal to the party leadership in the Liberal Party of Canada, it doesn't really matter how controversial your record is. For a person like Metlege, this is very obvious. I think a lot of people remember Metlege for what he did during the Freedom Convoy, his role in the unprecedented use of the Emergencies Act. So you can preside over major scandals, you can make decisions that eventually get struck down in court as the Attorney General. You can also be at the center of national outrage, and still you get to land one of the most prestigious and cushy diplomatic jobs in the country just because you were loyal, not because you were actually serving Canadians. So what does that tell MPs and Canadians at large? Well, I think it tells them the real currency is not accountability or performance in Ottawa. It's just loyalty, sticking with the team, defending the party line, and eventually, somewhere down the road, you'll get rewarded. And I think that's a dangerous incentive structure for any government, but unfortunately, that's just where party politics is at in this country, but especially with the Liberal government who has been holding the reins for quite some time now. Immigration Minister Lena Diab is under fire after a Conservative MP blasted the Liberal government for giving rejected asylum claimants better health benefits than many Canadian citizens. During a House of Commons Health Committee meeting on Tuesday, MP Matt Strauss questioned Diab after she couldn't provide data on the number of rejected refugee claims. Strauss said he was, quote, dumbfounded that the minister lacked the information. Strauss asked Diab if an individual continued to receive health care support from the interim federal health program after their refugee claim is denied. The minister initially said, quote, no, but quickly added that, quote, it follows through the process, and once the process is concluded, it ends.
If somebody's refugee claim is denied, do they continue to get all of this coverage? And you said no. Here I have your website. It says, as a refugee claimant, you'll get IFHP coverage if your claim for refugee protection has been rejected by the IRB. So did you lie to the committee, or is your website lying?
Excuse me?
I said, did you lie to the committee, or is your website lying?
Be careful with the language, Mr. Strauss.
Did you mislead the committee, or is the website misleading?
Not in the job of doing that. Thank you very much. It's not something that is in my dictionary either. So what I said is the interim federal health program provides temporary health care coverage to address urgent and essential medical needs for refugees and asylum claimants while they wait to become eligible for provincial and territorial health insurance plans. And
then I asked, if your refugee claim is denied, do you continue to receive coverage? And here your website says you continue to receive coverage if your claim is denied, if your refugee claim is denied by IRB.
I said they continue to receive claims until all the refugee process is concluded.
In September, Conservative immigration critic Michelle Rempel-Garner noted that the IFHP funds services that many Canadians do not receive or must pay for themselves, such as pharmaceuticals, vision care, counseling, assistive devices, prosthetics, home care, nursing homes, and physiotherapy, and occupational speech therapy. The fund has ballooned to more than 12 times the amount taxpayers paid for it just 9 years ago. Government data shows that taxpayers paid $66 million to the fund in 2016 to 2017, compared to a preliminary estimate of over $821 million for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year as of September, a 1,144% increase. She deferred the responsibility for that part of the process to the Immigration and Refugee Board itself, though Strauss noted that federal funds go to the program and federal ministers should be responsible for how taxpayer money is spent. So what is the solution to this? Because obviously pointing something out is important, but there needs to be a solution proposed. So what are Conservatives proposing? And how can we fix this issue when we have so-called refugees whose claims are denied and they're presumably not supposed to be here because they're not here on a legitimate claim, receiving health benefits that are better than most Canadians?
Yeah, Cosmin. So Conservatives just yesterday voted to bring the Auditor General and Parliamentary Budget Officer to investigate just how the money is being used in the interim federal health program. And notably, all of the Liberals tried to vote against it, but a Bloc Québécois person does sit on the committee, and they voted with the Conservatives. One thing they are pointing out is that doctors are often told to charge individuals using this program up to 5 times the amount that regular citizens pay for the same or less services. So the federal taxpayer is not getting good value for their taxes, and the federal government is just signing checks. But Michelle Rempel-Garner, the conservative immigration critic, released a suite of amendments to Bill C-12 that we were just talking about. Conservatives want to ban anyone who has failed in their refugee claim from getting any health coverage that isn't just emergency health care. They want to reduce the incentives for people to stay in the country beyond their asylum claim process. I mean, the immigration officials said this week that the IFHP will pay for anyone until they leave the country. So this is even after the process. The amendments also aim to make it easier to kick out fraudulent asylum claimants, such as people who return back to their country that they are seeking refuge from while they wait for the claim for their supposed asylum, for those who straight up lie to border officers to similarly have their claims terminated. So they hope to reduce the amount of fraudsters using this system that gives them better services than most Canadians have, just trying to tweak it since they're just the opposition.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.